In India, Martyr's Day, or Shaheed Diwas, isn't just a single day on the calendar. Nope, it's two. And the story behind these two dates reveals a fascinating look at the different paths people took in the fight for freedom. So let's get right to it. So let's just tackle the big question head on. How can one country have two separate days, both officially called Martyr's Day? One's in January, the other is in March. They honor totally different people from different moments in the independence struggle, but both are absolutely central to the story of the nation. And here's the answer, plain and simple. January 30th marks the tragic assassination of Mahatma Gandhi, a day of quiet, solemn remembrance. But March 23rd, that day honors three fiery young revolutionaries, Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, and Rajguru. Now, both days are incredibly important, but for this explainer, we're really going to dive deep into the story that led to the March 23rd commemoration. To really get what March 23rd is all about, we have to go back in time to a major event known as the Lahore conspiracy case. It was a chain of events that would seal the fate and the legacy of these young freedom fighters forever. So what lit the fuse? Well, it all started with an act of retaliation. The well-respected nationalist leader Lala Lajpat Rai died from injuries he got during a police lathi-charge. In response, a group of revolutionaries planned to assassinate the police superintendent they blamed. But in a huge case of mistaken identity, they ended up killing a different British officer, J.P. Saunders. And that one act set off a domino effect that no one could stop. And you can see on this timeline just how quickly everything escalated. After the killing of Saunders, Bhagat Singh carries out his most famous act, bombing the Central Assembly. But here's the crucial part. He and his associate, they didn't even try to escape. They wanted to be arrested so they could use the courtroom as their stage. Of course, this linked them directly to the Saunders murder and kicked off the Lahore conspiracy trial. From that point on, their path was pretty much set, ending with the death sentence on March 23, 1931. You know, the really incredible thing about that assembly bombing is that it was designed not to kill anyone. It was pure political theater. As Bhagat Singh himself famously said, if the deaf are to hear, the sound has to be very loud. They were protesting against harsh British laws, and that explosion was their way of making sure the colonial government and the entire world was forced to pay attention. So, we have the historical events, but what was actually going on inside the mind of the man at the center of it all? Well, Bhagat Singh's letters from prison they're an unbelievable window into his thoughts as he stared death right in the face. I mean, you gotta remember, he was only 23 years old. And his letters show he was deeply, profoundly human. He wrote, "Naturally, the desire to live should be in me as well. I do not want to hide it. This wasn't someone who was eager to die. And honestly, it's because he valued his life so much that his reason for sacrificing it becomes that much more powerful." And boom, here it is. This quote perfectly explains his thinking. He saw a strategic, almost calculated purpose in his own death. He believed that if he were hanged, his sacrifice would become a legend, inspiring countless others to rise up. His martyrdom, he figured, would fuel the revolution in a way that his life just couldn't. So for Bhagat Singh, death wasn't really the end. It was a means to an end. It was the beginning of his legacy. His name would transform into a powerful symbol, a rallying cry that would echo long after he was gone. It was just the ultimate calculated sacrifice. Because you see, Bhagat Singh wasn't just an activist with a gun. He was a thinker, an avid reader, and a writer who was driven by some really powerful ideas about what a revolution truly meant. This quote right here is maybe the core of his entire philosophy. He knew that the British could execute him, they could crush his body, but they could never, ever kill the idea of a free India. Individuals come and go, but an idea, once it takes root in people's minds, well, that's unstoppable. He wrote constantly in prison, and his essay, Why I Am an Atheist, is just proof of his incredible intellectual courage. It shows a young man wrestling with big ideas about faith, reason, and social justice. It proves he wasn't just fighting for political freedom, but for a revolution of the mind, too. And he also had this poetic, kind of romantic side to him, you know? This quote shows that he believed the intense passion that drives a lover, an artist, or a revolutionary, it all comes from the same place. It's that same fire of human conviction. And of course, you absolutely cannot talk about Bhagat Singh without this slogan, Inqilab Zindabad, or Long Live the Revolution. He and his comrades didn't invent it, but they made it famous. It echoed in courtrooms and in the streets, and it became the definitive chant of the entire freedom struggle. So, how is this revolutionary sacrifice actually remembered today? Well, the story doesn't quite end at the gallows. In fact, the final, strange chapter takes place on the banks of a river. The British authorities were terrified of a public backlash, so they didn't hand over the bodies of the three men to their families. Instead, under the cover of darkness, they secretly took them from the jail and cremated them at a place called Hussainiwala, right on the banks of the Sutlej River. But a secret that big was never going to stay buried. And today, that exact spot is home to the National Martyrs Memorial. But what's really wild is that after the partition of India, this land was actually part of Pakistan. It wasn't until 1961 that it was given back to India in a land swap. Now it's a site of pilgrimage, and every year on March 23rd, a huge Martyrs Fair is held there to keep their memory alive. And that brings us to a final thought. It's been over 90 years, and the sacrifice of Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, and Rajguru still inspires so many people. But it also makes you ask the question, beyond the memorials and the speeches, how should a revolutionary act like this, from a completely different time, be remembered in the India of today? That's really something for all of us to think about.